everybody. Welcome to AC Day 1. We're really excited to have you. I'm Sophia Boris. I'm the events manager for the college, and I'm going to host you through our discussion with Reid today. So it's going to be Let's Talk Nerdy About Nature with Reid. But before we begin, I just have a couple housekeeping things, and then we'll get to the talk. So please feel free to use the chat tab to engage with each other. The whole purpose of today is to connect with one another, see what each other's programs are in, see what you're into. This is how we kind of virtually have that community if we can't physically be on campus. There's also closed captioning available today. So the CC icon at the bottom of your toolbar, just click on that and that will become available. We're going to take questions throughout. So as we chat, feel free to use the Q&A chat box at the bottom again of your toolbar, or put them in the chat. We'll figure it out. But feel free to jump in and ask Ross your burning question. And then this will also be recorded. So if you want to watch it back or tell a friend about it, please go to the orientation website and you'll find it there. And then just a campus note from our campus community about the COVID-19 protocols. If you do plan on coming to campus this fall, please give COVID-19 screening process, and please check out the Algonquin College vaccine policy and FAQ documents before heading over. We'll share that link now in the chat, but it's just really important to prepare yourself before you get on campus. Okay, so as we kind of navigate today, we have a couple surprises. We have 4 gift cards that we're going to give away spontaneously. And really, we're looking for people who's kind of the most active in the chat. So just please connect with each other, connect with us. It's just really fun. And let's kind of test it out now. The gift cards, we'll leave a couple of mystery ones. There's some big ticket items there. But we have some Amazon gift cards and campus connections. So if everybody wants to open up your chat right now, I'm going to count you down to 3, and I want you to tell everyone what programs you're in. So 3, 2, 1. Awesome. That's super. There's a huge mix here. Cool. Love it. Okay, great. Now you guys can connect each other if you see someone else in your program. Okay, so let's get started. So Ross, Reid, if you guys can see him on the screen. Hey, Ross, if you want to give a little wave.
Hey there. How are you guys doing?
They all say good. So this is the thing.
Yeah.
It's a webinar, guys. So it's really Ross and I having a conversation today, but we can actually promote you in. So if you want to ask Ross a live question, raise your hand and we'll promote you to a panel member where we can bring you on screen to chat with him directly. But I just want to give you a couple of background things about Ross and who he is, because he's a really cool guy and I'm excited to have him here. He grew up in the Cascading Mountains and spent his youth exploring forests, mountains, and the coast. So he eventually pursued his passion for film when he attended a school of production in Montana. He has a combination of schooling and passion for nature that has led him to his career in outdoor adventure sports filmmaking. So Ross has traveled the world extensively, and then he's returned back to the mountains now, which he resides, and it really calls this his true love and his true home. So by blending his naturalist observation habits, his background in film and storytelling, and a bit of philosophy and humor, he hopes to share with you a slice of his profound love and his great outdoors. And how this can apply to all of you, it's really turning passion into purpose. So with that said, I'd like to welcome Ross. Hi, officially.
Hey, thanks for the intro. I appreciate that. And it's nice to meet everybody online here.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I think we should just get started. For anyone who hasn't, so I discovered you on Instagram and I was like, who is this guy? He's doing some crazy things and it's pretty awesome. So do you want to give everybody kind of some insight of who you are and what you do and what this is all about?
Yeah. So the project is called Nerdy About Nature, sort of leaning towards a pun, naughty by nature, but nerdy by nature was taken. So I just did nerdy about. And it all kind of basically started as a joke. So if you look at it now, it's an Instagram account. I have a YouTube channel on TikTok, just kind of like hitting all the social things. And really for me, it's just kind of like as a way to communicate with folks and share some pretty interesting facts about nature and fun facts and things that gets people to engage with the world around them in a different way, in a new way. Because a lot of the stuff is like, sorry, I'm just reading these comments as they come up here.
That's awesome.
Because a lot of the stuff is like things that you may have learned in like 3rd or 4th grade or whatnot, but then you forget about it as you get older and you get into the real world that we've created here. And some of it's so simple and so like mesmerizing and amazing that like it's really nice to kind of like remind people of that connection we have to the world around us, because so easily we can forget it, and then that gets us into big existential messes like the climate crisis and the COVID pandemic and everything here. So I think it's a really important, necessary thing in the world today. But yeah, Nerdy About Nature, it's been a kind of whirlwind project that has just kind of spiraled throughout the pandemic and stuff, just with, because yeah, I've just had all this time to kind of focus on it and work on it. So it's been a fun thing.
I think that's cool for students to hear, is that something that was kind of like a joke, right? And you're like, no, we're going to build in, and obviously it's grown extensively. So with that said, do you think social, and I'm just thinking like students have so much access to these platforms to tell stories. How did you use social to tell that story, and how did it affect the way that you're exceeding now with your messaging?
Well, I mean, in the world we live in, you know, like there's so much, like we're social beings, right? But increasingly in the world we live in, there's a disconnect from actual social connections, like one-on-one, especially during the pandemic. I mean, we're doing this on a Zoom call right now. Everybody's tuned in from wherever they are. And there's so much dependence on the social media to maintain your kind of your friendships and relationships of family and everything. So I think it's a great tool to connect there. And for me, it was just kind of like the natural thing to do even before the pandemic, because it was just it's funny, it's quirky, it's entertaining, trying to really blend in, you know, not only scientific fact that is rooted, you know, I have sources for all my videos. It's like not like I'm just like coming out with misinformation, but then doing it in a fun, engaging way that gets people actually interested in what's being said. I'm not sure if anybody ever saw there was a YouTube series years ago called Nature Walk. Actually, that was a big inspiration because it's hilarious. It was just this guy going around like, oh, you can tell it's an aspen tree because of the way it is. And it was great and it was funny, but there was absolutely nothing actually truly informative about it. And I always thought it would be really interesting to create something where you could have something that's engaging and funny and gets people like interested in what you're saying, but then actually deliver some information that they could use. And social media is just like a great way to do that, because you know things spread and shared and go viral and everything. And it's been a really fun just kind of exploration for me of different passions that I've had throughout my life and just have never actually pursued for various reasons, which I'm happy to chat about as well. I mean,
Okay, well, tell us. Yeah, I want to hear. How come?
so for those of you who don't know, or I mean, based on the little intro or haven't followed Nerdy About Nature or anything before. So, you know, I grew up in the Pacific Northwest and I always loved getting outside and being in nature. But at a very young age, I actually have like very triggering memories of being like horrible at multiplication and math. And it like scared me from a young age to ever get into like that sort of side of life with sciences and math and stuff. And even going through college, I ended up going to school in Montana for film studies. And I was like, you know, always interested in biology, and I was going into biology, but then never fully dove in because, you know, you have to perform all these tests and the chemistry stuff and the weighing and the ratios and the math. So I was like always triggered by this, thinking that I was never going to be able to be in it because I was never good at the sort of number side of things. So I went completely opposite spectrum, and I went into video and filmmaking, specializing in outdoor sports, action sports. So it was just a great excuse for me to continue to kind of travel around the world and get to see these amazing natural areas and engage in them like firsthand. And then all the while, you know, I was still very interested in all this stuff. So I'd come home after seeing some crazy tree in like Japan, and I'd Google about it, and I just read the wiki page for ages. And like, so like I would do all these different things. So I was kind of always learning on the back end of where I was going.
Yeah.
And then it kind of culminated to a point when I would go out with friends on just like hikes or ski tours or bike rides and just be chatting their ear off and be like, oh my God, like that's such a sweet cedar over there. Like, or check out the way that this hemlock is twisted around. And they're just like annoyed and like, oh my God, man, you need to start an Instagram channel or do something because we're tired of hearing this. And so that was kind of like the basis for beginning this. So I've kind of had like a windy route and path to get here. And I really think it's one of those situations where it's like I've always known kind of what I've been interested in. but instead of going straight for what I think that is, like you kind of like find diversions and stuff, like pick up extra skills and additional things along the way that help you kind of help your end goal once you get there in the end. I mean, I feel like I have picked up a lot of I guess like communication styles through video and through filmmaking. Like I know how to share things in a visual digital way, and I know how to like kind of communicate an effective message. Like with every once in a while I'll do kind of like a bigger issue piece. Like I did one on carbon sequestration and storage in forests, and I just did a recent one on the current election process as we're in here, and I'll bullet point, I'll kind of like make a little introduction, here's the meat of it, here's the conclusion, and then call to action kind of thing. So like I have the kind of structure that I never would have gotten had I gone down any kind of scientific route. Like I never would have been in the kind of science communications aspect of things if I had followed the numbers route. Yeah. So I think that's like, a really good message for a lot of people to learn and understand these days is there's, skills and aspects that you can take from all these different experiences in life and tie them into a way that is incredibly useful, especially as we kind of reach an age where, the jobs people are getting today are not the jobs that our parents had. Like everybody in this chat today, the job that they're going to end up getting likely doesn't even exist today. We're in this constant state of societal evolution. So it's important to remain open, remain humble, and always kind of continue to learn and adapt and evolve.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think that in terms of even the programs the students are attending and what they'll graduate, you'll take a piece of that, but maybe apply it to something completely different. When I went to school, what I went for and what I do now is very vastly different, but you take pieces of it, right, to apply to what you can do.
Exactly.
So, yeah, I think that's huge. A lot of people are like, oh, this is what I want to be for the rest of my life. That doesn't exist anymore. You can pivot and move around and do other things. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, I mean, and some people are able to have that kind of vision, and like more power to them. But I think like for the vast majority of people, I don't even know a figure like 90% plus. Like I think like, everybody is just kind of going along for the ride. And I think that's a really big misconception too that kids and people have growing up is you always tend to look at adults and figure like, oh, they know what they're doing. But it's like when you become an adult, you're like, actually, we're all just kind of BSing our way through this. Like everybody's making it up as we go. So I think it's like embracing that fluidity and taking part in it, taking part in life.
Yeah. And I think I always laugh when Oprah says this, but I'm going to say it. Like, what was your like aha moment when you knew you're like, I'm now doing what I should be doing in terms of like sharing your message? Like, when was that moment where you like surrounded by trees and nature and you're like, this is it? Or
yeah, that's an interesting question. I don't know, because I feel like I have those all the time, and it's a fine line. Like I feel like it kind of rides this balancing where like there are days when I'm like I feel like I need to go out to say something because there's like a pressing topic, like out here on the West Coast, like the whole Fairy Creek situation, kind of logging the last of the old growth forest has been a very pressing issue. It's very time sensitive because the longer you sit silent on the issue, the more damage is like irrevocable damage is done to these ecosystems. So like there are days when I'm like, oh, like I feel like I need to go out and do that, and then it feels like work. And of course, like this is unpaid, like it's just kind of like a passion thing that is community supported. I do like partnerships with like different nonprofits to help spread those messages and everything. But I think the real moments come when I'm just like, if I'm ever to just like go out on my own or like take the dog for a walk and see something so cool, I feel like I can be a little kid again, and then just like pull my phone out and do some like really fast talking rant into it to explain to people what's happening with this crazy mushroom that's doing this thing on this tree. So I think it's those moments where you find yourself in flow state. And
that's great. And there's lots of, if you're looking at the chat right now, there's lots of stuff about mushrooms and fungi.
Yeah, fantastic fungi is, that's crazy. That's definitely a trending little film right now. I love the way they tied that all in. And if anybody's familiar with Suzanne Simard and the work that she's done in forest ecology, especially with like healthy soils and the way that forests kind of evolve and stand, it's just totally turning the industry on its head, which is amazing. Only that industry is very slow to adapt, as many industries are. So it's cool stuff.
Yeah, keep writing that in the chat, guys. That's great. What about the Octopus Teacher? I've never heard of that. You?
Oh, I have heard of that one. I haven't seen that one yet, though. I hear that one's really incredible.
Very cool.
Yeah, lots of good movies out there.
It is. Netflix has lots as well. In terms of, okay, so you have this passion, you've turned it into purpose, but everyone needs to be paid, Ross. So how does that work in terms of applying? So do you get partnerships from this eventually, or what's your like, and for advice for students, like this is, passion on the side is great, but then, how do we pay our bills and do all that stuff and kind of merge the two? What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, again, I think we're just in such a unique time where it's really kind of about having the foresight and the vision to create something, because now more than ever, we have the ability to create what we want. It's not like, it's not like 10 years ago you would open up, or not like 20 years ago, you would open up a phone book and find a company that does communications and see if there's this role here. Like you don't find a job like this listed on, oh God, what's that job hunting site?
Oh gosh.
There's like Craigslist or anything. That's so
it. Yeah.
outdated. Nobody
Yeah.
uses Craigslist anymore. But like you would never see a job posting for this. So it's like you have to, yeah, Indeed. There you go.
Yeah, there you go.
So you have to kind of like find the ability to adapt and create your own. And there's this analogy that I like to use. It's more relevant, I find, out here in the Pacific Northwest, just with the trees and stuff. And it's just kind of like taking cues from nature. But you see in like a healthy old growth forest ecosystem, you'll see like a downed log where this little hemlock cone has landed on it and then started to grow. And then that rotting log kind of fell. So the hemlock bent, then it had to redirect its leader. And they form like the trees and the ecosystems around here just are this constant supply of inspiration for adaptability. And like, a tree will land in one place, start to grow, and then something crazy happens to it, whether it's a windstorm, it snaps and it finds a way to sprout new branches and keep growing. And it creates these really funky shapes and crazy growing conditions that just stand as like a testament to dealing with like all the ups and downs of life. And I feel like that's something that like we all could learn from, so much. In our society, we, especially in like the boomer generation, we've kind of based on this idea where it's like you go to school, you get a job, and then you're stable for life. And we've learned that that is just not the world we live in anymore. So we have to kind of always be adapting and willing to learn and willing to step outside of our comfort zones and do something different. So me, to bring this full circle, when it comes to like making money at it, to pay bills, I've leaned a lot into like the crowdfunding aspect of it. I have a Patreon page where I get a little bit of support from, which is nice. And then I've been blending. So I still do film work on the side, or like my career, is like still in film. And this is kind of a side project that's gradually eating up more and more of my time. And as I make that transition, I'm kind of like moving into a place where I can approach different, whether that be kind of commercial goods sponsors or nonprofit organizations. I've been trying to kind of lean into those. It's not like huge budgets, but like, again, like in a science communication realm, I feel like I have like a different skill set or toolbox that I can like offer to these people to help communicate their objectives. So there's one out here called Rain Coast Conservation Foundation that I did a project for with them in Patagonia just recently. So it's just kind of like going out and teaching people how to measure big trees, because building big tree registries is a really important conservation tool for identifying areas of high conservation priority. And that's like one of their many kind of like things that they're trying to do. And I just played like a little role in helping to explain that and engage that in conversation to get it out to a bigger audience, then was able to get paid through that. So it's kind of like, every day is different. I know this isn't like the kind of stable job that like my parents would have liked to have had, but I feel like that's like an element of, I don't know, it's fun, it's adventurous, it keeps life entertaining. And I feel like if you're not doing something that you love and that you have fun doing, then why bother doing it,
Yeah. And I think that's a good message for our students to hear right now as they start their academic, journey. This is the first step. There's going to be many others, as we talked about before. Yeah, for sure. I'm just looking at the chat. Have you been looking at this chat? There's so many different documentaries. Have you seen The Biggest Little Farm? I watched it on Netflix. It's pretty, you need to watch this. I feel like you would love this.
What's it about?
It was two city slickers that bought a farm, and then they grew everything from the land. Like nothing was brought in. It was just like an ecosystem turning over. It's the coolest thing ever. Yeah, you need to watch it. Look at all these great, keep adding them in. Do you guys have any? The 5 lines, that's funny. That's great. Okay, yeah. Do you guys have any questions for Ross? Write them in here. Absolutely. Take advantage. And if there's any like life questions or how we got started and you want some more details? Do you have, is there like advice that you'd give students in terms, I understand that we talked about your passion, but I kind of like the social side, because a lot of our students use social too as like that vessel to promote and to look for opportunities. I know you talked a little bit about the tips of when you're actually filming, where you have like your intro, your kind of your content, and then your like call to action. Is there something else that you've integrated into your social that really like that you can share that they can kind of try on their own little passion projects?
Well, I mean, I kind of look at that as like almost like writing an essay is kind of like where I feel like that skill set came from, where it's like, you have the hook, what you're going to talk about, you break down why it's important, you go into like how all this connects, and then like the conclusion. From a social side of it, yeah, I mean, I'm not big on like, you go to some Instagram accounts and like incredibly like manicured with like the way that the photos line up and like these tiles. I don't really try to pay attention to that too much, because I just feel like that's just too time consuming, and I'm not a person who like sees an account like that as like, oh wow, that's amazing. So I kind of like look at myself as like the prime person I'm trying to market to. It's like just balancing fun facts, heavy topics with light topics. I'll do like one video that's like all about how corrupt government stuff is when it comes to like managing a lot of like ecological and environmental conservation stuff, and then I'll do one about just like how to identify a huckleberry, and then I'll do one on like indigenous issues and how this all ties into the world we're living in and these current events happening at Fairy Creek and everything, and then I'll go back and I'll do one on how to identify a hemlock tree. So it's like it's having this like balance of like, because I feel like it's really easy to go down the really heavy extreme route, but that's like incredibly time consuming. And especially in the world we live in, where there's just already so many difficult topics and conversations to be having almost on like a constant basis, it's nice to have some lightness. And even if it's still relevant lightness, it still is engaging. It still gets people to, be more engaged in the world around them and see things in a different way. So I feel like that's a really good kind of balance to strike.
I really like what you said too about being organic. I think sometimes too, people use social to create this brand, but it's not necessarily who they are, right? So if you have more of a messy approach in a good way, where it's just very diverse. Yeah.
Yeah. And Gwen, I just saw your comment there. Ologies is an amazing podcast. If you guys are into podcasts, 10 out of 10 recommend that one. That one's great. Talking about a woman who went viral for sharing foraging tips on TikTok. There's all that sort of stuff out there now that I think that this social media world we live in gives you such a great opportunity to expand on something you love and to like share that stoke and that passion with the world around you. My one kind of like caveat to that I've noticed from observing social media in the past and now kind of being part of it on like a new level is just making sure that you have that what you're saying is credible and that you have like legitimate peer-reviewed sources, because there's so much misinformation out there these days. And like I get trolled all the time by like loggers that grew up in the 80s that think that this is the way things should be, and they come in like hot and mad and angry, and then if you can like calmly collectively be like, no, like actually here's this, like send them sources, like I DM like everybody that like comes at me with like any sort of anger. I'm like a big fan of like, the only way that anybody in this society, like we're all part of this society and we come from different spectrums on different axes all over, but the only way we're ever going to be able to get anything done is if we engage in constructive conversation. And the more you alienate people, the more you yell at people, or the more you dismiss them and tell them they're wrong, it's just going to further galvanize things. So we really need to be at a point when we're willing to be like, willing to have these hard conversations and be like, well, actually, this is what the data says. This is what the science says. This is who funds it too. Because there's this one industry or this one company out here that does science, and it's called ResourceWorks, but it's fully an industry funded thing that only ever backs up industry. They have no peer reviewed stuff. It's like they turn their comments off on all their posts, and it's just like, how do you expect to engage in a conversation that actually accomplishes things if you aren't willing to listen to the other side? So I think yes, share your passions, do that, make sure you know what you're talking about and that you have sources to back stuff up, so that if people come at you with like either not believing it or not trusting it, you can actually kind of build that communication and that connection they have with the subject, so that they can continue to learn and grow on their own, because we're all just learning and growing as we go. So
Yeah, I love that. Is there any, I'm going to ask a question that kind of relates to this. Is there any good books that you read or resources that I think are a good fit for the people watching?
I mean,
What's your favorite book?
I have so many favorite books, but they're all like nature kind of focused.
Okay.
I think a book everybody should read is Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer. That's a really incredible book, especially in the modern world as we're kind of like facing all of these really existential issues, how to go about solving them with an indigenous kind of holistic methodology. It's really incredible. 10 out of 10 recommend that one. As for like books pertaining to social media, I haven't like social media and communications and stuff. I read one a while ago called The Shallows. That was really interesting. I think it's called The Shallows, and the byline is like what the internet is doing to our brains. I don't know how relevant it is nowadays because I think it was written back in like 2009 or 2010 or 11 or something.
Okay. Yeah.
But that was a really interesting read just on communication and how quick humans are to adapt to communication. Yeah, I mean, you think about like when we went from writing everything by hand to the typewriter, there was this like whole kind of social thing happening where all of a sudden people could type and write so much faster than they could in the past that like their brain was able to like actually kind of keep up. And then we moved to laptops, and then now with like the way that like or I guess social media and texting has changed the way that we communicate with, you know, like LOL and all these different like acronyms and things that we use. It's kind of sort of bridging into its own type of language in itself. It's no longer like the Oxford dictionary style of like pure true English, you know, it's a whole separate thing, and it's still a communication style. It's still a language. That was a really interesting book. The Shallows, yeah, thank you for posting that up. That's a good one. And Braiding Sweetgrass, yeah, there are quite a few books. I could actually talk about that, but they're mostly like tree related, naturey type stuff. So I don't know how everybody in the chat feels about that.
Well, we can chat. We can put them in the chat after as we're signing off if anyone wants to take a look. That's awesome. Is there a wild story that you were out in nature that you need to tell us about? Like that you were like, oh wow, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen, or I mean, I see your Instagram posts. They're all kind of wild, like in their own way.
Yeah, I mean, they're all there's been some really interesting things. Let me think about this. I mean, the first one that came to mind, I had this really amazing trip a few years ago. Wow, yeah, it was like it was like 6 years ago now. It's crazy how time flies. I got to go up to northern Sweden and Norway for a ski film shoot. And that was the first time I was able to fly over the Arctic Circle to go to Europe. And like, first of all, being able to see the ice breaking up and melting is a pretty like powerful and pivotal thing, because you see it on TV and stuff, but to like look out the window of an airplane and see that expanse falling away to the horizon of just like breaking up ice sheets is really powerful. But then on that trip, we were doing like some like backcountry heli skiing stuff up in like the Arctic Circle, and we were like right up on the border of like Sweden and Finland, in Lapland area, if you're familiar with it. And I like one point, you know, some guys were going to ski a line on the valley over there, and I was going to shoot it from this one peak. So I got dropped off at this peak, and it was like sunset out there, and then they flew away to go do the other guys, and like it was just me on this peak in the middle of like the Arctic Circle, silent, absolutely silent everywhere, and just like, you know, just being that exposed and knowing that like, you know, I couldn't just walk back to town if something went wrong. Like I'm like, you know, thousands of meters up on this mountain peak that I don't even know what it's like going down. So even if I were to try to like ski down or something, like I have no idea what's below me or where to go. So I mean, like moments like that I think just remind you of how small and insignificant we really are is great. And I feel like you can find that, and like the average person can find that in a wide variety of outdoor kind of sports, outdoor engagement. I mean, you know, mountain biking, it's really easy to get yourself to some remote places and just like looking over an expanse and just realizing how small you are. I'm a big surfer now, and surfing is like a great way to kind of feel that power of the ocean and realize just the power of Mother Nature. And I think there's a lot of different things you can feel, and like that's me talking on like the extreme side for me too, but I mean it can be as simple as like going out camping and like forgetting a headlight, and then all of a sudden you're like in the dark, like trying to fumble your way around. It's like these little moments that I think bring us out of our bubble of society or civilization and remind us that we are still so intricately connected to these landscapes and the world around us. Like, we look at trees and forests as resources, when in reality there's so much more than that. They, purify the air we breathe and sequester the carbon that we put out, and filter the water. And there's a lot to it.
And I think that's to be said, like, and not to discount that maybe we didn't know this before, but also like COVID, just, being, it really opened your eyes, like, to different, and put you outside in nature when there's nothing else to do. You immersed yourself in, you went for a hike, a walk, or whatever. But it was like those moments that you maybe didn't have time for before, or didn't make time for. And it was just that little reminder of like who we are, where we're coming from. And it's really cool.
And there's a big mental health element to that as well. I think like a lot of people, I know that myself personally, I've been struggling like a huge part during this whole pandemic. And there's the Japanese concept of Shinrin Yuku, which is forest bathing. It's kind of like a trending thing. But I mean, the very basis of that is like immersing yourself in nature, not even like full immersion, just going to a neighborhood park, sitting under a tree. If anybody, like, go to a camping outdoor store, get yourself a hammock. That is 100% the best thing you can do. Like, I attribute a lot of the things that I've learned about the world around me to just like having time to hang out in a hammock. You can, you only pitch them under trees. You're not going to go pitch a hammock in some stairwell somewhere, so it's like, it is just like an easy way to get out and just be outside. I think spending that time outside is just so good for your mental health. It just, the pace slows down when you're able to just like watch some like, branches sway in the wind. It's so good for you. And I wish I had more research and things to talk to about that, other than just knowing that it's great for you.
Well, if you look at the chat right now, there's some wild stories in there in terms of what they love about nature. It's just funny because, Gwen, like you said, like just being stuck in traffic and then seeing a bison on the road in Yellowstone, like, it's just like, again, it's everyday life and you're reminded quickly. But there's some real cool studying in Australia. I'm glad you guys are posting these. These are great. This is what we want to see. Also good at having houseplants. Yes, agreed. If you can't go outside, a lot of people, like I live in the city and there are green spaces, but majority of it is buildings. So you have to kind of create your own space as well.
Yeah, and Australia is amazing too. So who said that? Sumi? Yeah, the mountains in Australia are pretty amazing. I spent some time down there as well. And that's like another thing that I kind of left out of my whole kind of story. I went to school for film, got into film studies or film production work, kind of did that for like a decade and got my like dream job that I always thought I wanted, and then realized that it just wasn't what I was like, working for like one of the biggest ski companies in North America. And I was like so stoked at the time. And then I just kind of like grinded on me. I realized that this actually wasn't what I had kind of thought it would be in my mind. So I left that and I actually did a full 180 and went to school in Australia to get an MBA. So not even, again, that was the second time I didn't even go into like biology or nature stuff. I was like, business sucks. I'm going to do what I can so that I know how to understand business better, so I can either do it better or help those doing it better, or like, whether that means that like I'm going to work for a nonprofit or something in the future. Like, I don't care. It just was like, I was driven to do that at the time, but got to spend a couple of years in Australia, and that's a gorgeous continent for sure.
So what would be your favorite place that you visited? If there's a favorite.
Well, I mean, I'm partial to the Northwest. I think, I grew up kind of out of Seattle. So like around the Salish Sea, between here and Vancouver Island and stuff. Like, it's such a gorgeous part of the world. I always love returning home. Having said that, everywhere is gorgeous. Everywhere from deserts in Arizona, the East Coast, like I've been out to Quebec once. That was gorgeous. I'd love to spend more time out there.
Everyone always says that. I went to Quebec once. It's far for the West Coasters.
Yeah. I mean, but that's the thing, is like, it's really about just like, seeing the beauty in the little things, because you can find beauty everywhere you are. Like, yeah.
And so what are you doing in Squamish right now? So is there some side projects that you're working on? What can we see that's new and exciting from you?
I actually just kind of wrapped another film that's Not really nature related. It's a film called Reid. It's a short film that Arc'teryx sponsored. I haven't really ever talked about it publicly before. This is like the first time because we're doing a film festival tour with it, and then hopefully trying to release it in the spring or midwinter kind of. But it's all about there's this group out in Whistler called the Indigenous Life Sport Academy. So it's working with Indigenous youth from the Squamish and Lil'wat nations, getting them out exposed to outdoor sports, getting them involved in skiing, snowboarding, biking, hiking. I think they're doing golf now too. They do like just a wide variety of sports. And the kind of reasoning behind it is, like not only is it a great way to build connections to those around you and build community, especially in like a lot of these really these struggling like indigenous nations, like with these youth that are facing so many issues these days. But it's also a great way to like reconnect to the land and like the land that has traditionally always been their ancestral land. So I did a film about that, and like during that I went up north to Witsat, which is Wet'suwet'en territory, and did like a skiing thing with a group up there and kind of got them into it. So it's kind of about this bigger movement of engaging with Indigenous youth in ways to connect them to the lands that are theirs. So yeah.
That's awesome. And then this film tour, is it going to come to Ottawa or Ontario, or can we see you somewhere around here?
There's talks about it. Yeah, we're right now. I just kind of have it submitted to a couple of film festivals out here in the West, and then I know that like Burton, Canada was a big sponsor for it, so they want to do a big premiere in the Toronto area. Again, it's all so up in the air with COVID.
Yeah.
I mean, it would be great to do a big premiere there, but we'll just have to see what the restrictions and things are like around February. So
Yeah, sounds very cool though. That's awesome.
yeah.
We have our first official question in the Q&A. This is great. Populate them, everybody. And they really want to know if poisonous
plants
fascinate
you. Yeah, that's an interesting thing too, is because when we think of things as poisonous, it's from our limited human perception of what is poisonous. There are so many different plants that would be toxic to us if we eat them, but deer have no problem munching them and eating away. So I think the concept of poisonous plants is funny in general. And to speak to a larger issue, the idea of nature is funny to me too, because nature is a man-made construct that puts everything that's not man's world outside of it, when in reality we are all part of nature. This is all nature. We're animals who wear clothes made out of plants like all the time, and clothes made out of oil. Like we are part of nature. But yeah, poisonous plants are definitely interesting. I find that poisonous animals would be maybe more interesting, just because that has like a genuine like malicious intent to kill or paralyze something usually, whereas like a plant, it doesn't really do a plant harm to have something poisonous that kills something, because then it's just like don't eat me. Like you can make it taste bad, you can make it toxic, but again, with life being life, things are going to adapt and like find a way to eat that thing that tastes bad because it's the only food source available.
Yeah, cool.
Carnivorous plants are nuts. Yeah, that's interesting.
I always try to, if they're poisonous for animals, I take my dog on lots of hikes, and that's always, don't touch that. Okay, there's another question here is, who is your mentor? Do you have a mentor?
I don't think I have a mentor necessarily. Like I don't have anybody that like kind of help me to like guide me through this. No, but I definitely have like some idols, like people that I would like love to shake their hand. Suzanne Simard, as I mentioned, is amazing. Jim Pojar, who's like a really well-known ecologist in the Pacific Northwest. He's like, that guy is rad. There's quite a few people out there that I could just like continue, who I would just be absolutely stoked to meet. E.O. Wilson, David Attenborough, if I ever get the chance. Oh. David Suzuki, there's so many.
Yeah, that's good. That means that they can look them up now and then know who they are. That's great.
Yeah.
Okay, and as we like kind of wrap up, and again, anyone who's watching, like ask questions. We have the next like 5 minutes or so. If you have any questions, you want to learn more. But I guess like if there's one thing, I know we talked a little bit about, how we guide and how we form our careers. Any other words of wisdom for our learners today, that if there's one thing or a couple things you can leave them with, that again, beyond our education and what we've done with our passion and careers, is there something, just life lessons, Ross?
Yeah, I would say don't be afraid to have the hard conversations, and whether that's with family, with friends, with a partner. I think that a lot of the issues that we've kind of created in the world, whether that be on personal levels or broader societal levels, all stem from some sort of ego, or someone not being able to, having like excessive pride and not being able to like exercise humility and authentically listen to the other side and like engage in conversation. And it's difficult for sure, but like you're gonna survive. It's just words, like nothing is, I want to swear, nothing is effed, like to quote Big Lebowski, like you can do a lot of crazy things in life and have put yourself at much more risk than it is to just have a hard conversation where you explain how you feel or explain why someone, the way that they did something hurt you, and all that's going to do is like open up your relationships, both personally, professionally, on every aspect to a much deeper level. And I think that that is like a really important thing to kind of continue going through, no matter what area of study that you get into, no matter where you go in life, whether that's you could decide to follow your passions, you follow like a great career, whatever it is. If you're just like staying open and honest to humility and being able to have difficult conversations, I think it'll always work out in the best, and you're gonna survive. Like it's not like someone's holding a gun to your head here. It's not like feast or famine. Like
Yeah.
it's a conversation. So like be willing to open yourself up to conversation.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant advice. I think oftentimes it's avoidance that a lot of people have. And if we could just tackle it head on and be respectful and listen, I think that's a huge component of success, just with dialogue. So
Yeah.
and
And
then
and that's a huge thing that people always like tend to forget about is like, conversation consists of, yes, talking, but also listening.
yes, yeah,
So,
agreed. And then just to kind of end on a lighter note and to kind of feel like, what were you like as a student, Ross? No pressure, but what's your
ooh,
favorite like academic memory? I feel like, I don't know, I go back to Frosh Week and I laugh to myself and I was like, oh, that was fun. Is there anything in your school life that you were like, oh yeah, this was great? I want students to feel excited for their upcoming year.
um, yeah, I don't know what sort of like stories I could really tell about myself. Uh, I was in two phases in life during my two kind of like college schooling experiences. The first stage was right out of high school, and I was definitely like reckless, young. Like I didn't show up to class a lot, but then I knew that I had the work ethic to like put in the work when it really needed to be done. But like, I also like there was this one time I think I spent like 4 days solid consecutive, didn't go to any classes, sleeping in this willow tree on campus in Bozeman, because it was summer. I had a hammock, the weather was great, and I like after like a day I was like, I'm not even gonna leave the tree. I didn't even set foot on the ground. And I had like pizza delivered. Like I remember talking to the pizza delivery guy, like, no, in the big willow, like you go right past the parking lot. And like, so it was like stupid. It's a great time to just like be silly and goofy. Not that you can't do that at other times in your life, but yeah. I don't
It
know.
is.
I don't know where that
That's
goes. That
great.
was just a fun thing that came to mind. And then the second time, I was down in Australia and I went to school down in Melbourne, and I was just like trying to surf as much as I could down there. So I lived in the city for a year, and I would catch like the 5 a.m. Train to go out to the coast, and I would surf, and I'd come back and write my paper and study and do all that stuff. But that was like very much like a very deliberate balance. I think like at that point in my life, I was much more calculated, and I would, urge people to kind of find this balance in their life, just like knowing what you want to do that makes you happy, that like fulfills your soul, and then knowing what you need to do to like fulfill your kind of purpose in life and what you're doing. So it was like I would get the early train to go surfing, and then I'd have my books on the train, and I'd be using that like kind of null time to like read, just so I could do the thing that like fulfilled my soul, knowing that I would have to come back to the city and go to school, which like, I wasn't very stoked on, but I knew that I needed to do it. So
Yeah, but you kind of have two phases of life, right? Like the fun, adventurous, calling for pizza out of a hammock, and then I'm assuming, and I think it applies to when you're more focused. And I remember when I got my master's, you're more focused. You know exactly what you're doing
Yeah.
and what you want out of it. So it's a little
Yeah.
bit different. But there's all means between college, university, furthering on to
Mhm.
more post-secondary education. It just depends on what you're looking for. So there's no rules of how you accomplish that. Kind of just navigate and have some fun along the way.
Yeah. And I think to that point too, it's also speaking about having difficult conversations with other people, it's also having that conversation with yourself too, and staying true to like what you really want and what you need. If you don't want to go out on a Friday night because you're feeling like run down and everybody's pressuring you, stay in. Like,
Yeah.
don't cave into like anybody's expectations or anything that you think that people expect of you. Like if it's not serving you and your mental health, your personal health, like your passions, what you want to be doing, then don't bother, because life is short and you're only going to regret that time like later. So
Yeah.
stay true to
Okay. So
you.
let's end on one more question. I love that. That's great. And it goes back to nature. So I guess who you are, and did nature help you study?
Yeah.
Well, you had a
I
hammock and
think,
a tree and ordering pizza, so I think so.
yeah, I think to that same point of nature being like it's calming. We've evolved to be outside. Like our eyes can see more shades, more hues and shades of green than we can any other color in the spectrum. So like we're attuned to being outside in these foresty kind of leafy green settings. And I think it puts our minds at ease. So like, yes, I definitely try to like, when I'm like studying for things or working, even now, like having a laptop, I'll pop outside, and like it's so easy to just like be outside, because I think it brings you to a calmer state where you can absorb more. And even if it's like pissing rain, sit by a window. Like having daylight as a big part of your life is a good thing. It's statistically been shown to like improve your morale, and
Yeah.
yeah.
And the workforce is changing. I think even now, like it's a hybrid approach. Like we're event planners, we used to be on site all the time, and now we can work from anywhere. And I think that's a really cool thing, and continues with your studies as well. For everyone watching, is that you don't need to be in your home or your dorm room or wherever kind of applies to your situation in life. You can go outside, take a break, coffee shop, whatever kind of works for your environment. It's very it's more relaxed now in terms of you don't have to be somewhere for a specific amount of time in a certain environment. It's more flexible. So
Yeah. Kind of embracing the fluidity of it and like the organic nature of it. I try to strive to have kind of like a blue collar computer life if I can. Like if I can work at a high top table and stand, like I'll do that. If I can work outside on my laptop when the weather's nice, I don't need to worry about rain or anything, like I'll do that. Like I think like we're tied so much to our devices and computers and stuff. It's easy to just find yourself at a desk sitting all day, and that's so bad for you. Like just like your body just hunches over, and it's so much nicer to be standing up, to be able to walk, to be able to like think, especially if you're in any sort of like creative kind of creative mindset where you're like having to like really like kind of delve into like the depths of your brain to figure something out, problem solve. Being able to stand and kind of walk around, bounce on one leg to the other is incredibly helpful.
yeah. Yeah. As I sit up straight, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's great. Well, thank you, Ross. If we have any more questions, honestly, I think it's great to just see your passion turn into purpose. If you aren't already following Ross on social, it's just a really easy avenue to kind of see who he's about and the different stories and topics that he's covering. We really appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah. Thanks for
You're
having me. I really
awesome. Thank you
appreciate it.
so much. And if anybody has any questions, the best way to connect with him is
Hit me up on Instagram for quick, easy things. Like, feel free to follow me. If you DM me, like I try to respond to everybody. Again, big fan of conversation. And if you have anything like any deeper projects or burning things, feel free to email me at nerdyboutnature@gmail.com. That's just kind of like an easier way for me to like handle some bigger subjects. I don't know. I've had students who have a podcast or something and they want to talk to me on or something. Like, feel free to hit me up. I'm open to collaborating and sharing and exploring this world and life that we're all living in.
I love it. And if you guys want to watch this again because you need a refresher, you want to hear the books or the speakers that we talked about, find it on the orientation website. And other than that, enjoy your AC Day 1. There's lots of things going on tonight, as well as the rest of the day. And then the fireworks are virtually this evening over the Student Association YouTube channel. So thanks everyone for joining. And thank you, Ross, so much. We can't wait to connect with you again soon.
Thanks everybody.
Thanks.